slide. I'm going to start with a slide and then I will eliminate that and just come back and make my introductory remarks. So let's see if I can get this slide up and running. Okay. Can
Looks
everybody
good.
see that?
Yep.
Okay, so I want you to think about the animal kingdom. If you, oops, I just lost my slide to myself. There we go. I want you to think, if you will, about the animal kingdom for a moment, and we'll come back to human beings shortly. There are 5 life goal decisions every living organism must make, and there's a typo. These are not either or choices, but they're energy and effort allocation decisions. So I'm going to show you the 5, and I want you to think about different animals, different organisms, and think about which life goal an organism should invest more of its limited energy and effort into. One choice is, should they invest it in early and frequent reproduction or in survival, their own growth and longevity? Should they invest it in quantity or quality of offspring? And in this case, quality means high parental investment. Should they invest their limited time and energy into current or future reproduction? Future meaning delayed reproduction until conditions are more favorable. Should the investment be in early reproduction or prolonged personal growth? Is it better to mature and reproduce quickly, or mature slowly, invest in body development, skill development, and or resource acquisition before reproducing? Should they put effort into mating, that is seeking and finding a mate and reproducing, or into parental investment? And if you think about different animals, different organisms, different species, answer these questions in different ways. Because the answer is that which strategy is adaptive depends on how harsh the organism's environment is. So I'm now just going to quit the slide and just give you my introductory remarks with that as a way to begin. In evolutionary psychology, we're now going to zoom away from thinking about the animal kingdom in general and think about our species for the rest of our conversation, just human beings. In evolutionary psychology, life history strategies refer to the ways in which organisms allocate resources to growth, survival, and reproduction. And these strategies can be broadly categorized into 2 types: fast life history strategies and slow life history strategies. 2 key ideas in this area. The first key idea in understanding the concept of life history strategies is the idea of trade-offs between different life goals. And that's why I began with the slide that I just showed. All organisms must grow, survive, and reproduce, but they have limited resources, including limited time, limited energy, and limited effort, which forces them to make choices about how to allocate those limited resources to growth, survival, and reproduction. The second key concept is the idea of harshness. Harshness refers to the environmental conditions.
You muted, Steve.
Have I been muted the whole time?
No.
No, just the last
No.
10 seconds.
Sorry, that's strange. I didn't touch a thing. Harshness.
Limited resource, yeah.
So the second key concept is harshness. Harshness refers to environmental conditions that reduce an individual's like somebody may want to mute. I don't know
She
if
did.
I heard that. Okay.
She did.
Harshness refers to conditions that reduce an individual's likelihood of survival or reproductive success, typically through high levels of risk and unpredictability. In harsh environments, one faces frequent threats to well-being and survival. Harsh environments are characterized by high mortality risk, scarce resources, economic instability, health risks, social and/or physical danger, unpredictability, and uncertainty. In general, environments low in socioeconomic status tend to be harsher than environments high in socioeconomic status. Now, if you combine these two key ideas of trade-offs and harshness, you get the core idea of life history theory, which in a simple sentence is the choices you make about how to allocate your time, energy, and effort between growth, survival, and reproduction are different depending on how harsh your environment is. Stated differently, what is adaptive, that is what enhances fitness in a harsh environment, is different than what's adaptive in a more benign environment. If you live in a harsh environment characterized by scarcity, unpredictability, high mortality risk, long-term planning may not seem viable. It would be rational and adaptive to focus on the present rather than the future, and to prioritize immediate survival and reproduction. In other words, to reproduce early and often with low parental investment. That is a fast life strategy. On the other hand, if you live in a more benign environment with higher predictability, more resources, and lower mortality risk, long-term planning seems viable. So it would be rational and adaptive to focus on your future as well as your present and sacrifice immediate reproductive output for long-term success. In other words, to have fewer offspring later in life with high parental investment in each. That is a slow life strategy. So what does this look like in humans? Individuals with a fast life strategy may engage in early sexual activity, have children at a younger age, and invest less in each child. This can be seen in environments where resources are unpredictable and mortality rates are high, which promotes a focus on reproducing quickly to ensure genetic survival. Individuals with a slow life strategy may marry later, have children at an older age, and invest heavily in education and upbringing of fewer children. This strategy is often seen in stable environments where resources are abundant and predictable, which allows for long-term planning and investment in offspring. There are some really important ethical considerations when discussing life history strategies in relation to socioeconomic status. I want to stress that neither strategy is better in a moral sense. Each strategy is better suited to a different set of social conditions, but that does not mean one strategy is morally superior to the others. If you're in an environment with abundant resources and low mortality, a slow life strategy is viable. But if, in contrast, if you're in a resource scarce and high mortality environment, a fast strategy may be more advantageous because your future is uncertain. Investing in longevity may not pay off, making immediate reproduction more critical. So it's important to avoid pathologizing or stigmatizing fast strategies that are often adaptive in certain environments. There are individual differences within these environments that are worth noting. Some individuals in environments low in socioeconomic status, that is, in harsh environments, will nevertheless adopt a slow strategy. And conversely, some individuals in high socioeconomic status environments, that is, less harsh environments, will nonetheless adopt a fast strategy. I think we have to look at individual childhood and personal experiences to explain this. So one last comment, and I'll toss it open for discussion. There are sex differences to be aware of. In general, and please hear my in general, I want to put that in bold capitalization. In general, women are more likely to adopt slow life strategies. That is, to wait to have children, have fewer of them, and invest highly in each one. This makes evolutionary sense given the high biological costs of pregnancy and childbirth and the genetic imperative to raise a child to adulthood, which is more likely to occur if the mother acquires stable resources through education, career, and/or a long-term committed relationship. Compared to women, men are more likely to adopt fast life strategies. That is, seek short-term relationships, have more children early, and not invest as highly. It's also common for fast strategy men to engage in social or financial risk-taking behavior as they try for quick and immediate gains in status or resources. Last comment, though, is that sex interacts with environmental conditions and social norms. In harsher environments, women may shift to fast strategies, which can maximize reproductive success in those conditions. But even in harsh environments, women typically maintain higher parental investment compared to men. Conversely, in more stable environments, men may shift to adopt slower strategies to ensure their children's long-term success. But even in stable environments, comparatively, there will be more men with fast strategies than women with fast strategies. Lastly, cultural and social norms influence these strategies, often reinforcing traditional gender roles. So it's an interesting but somewhat complex area, and I'll stop there and toss it open for discussion. I do have some discussion questions I could pose, and I posted on Hilo, but I'll use them if I need to. Otherwise, I'll just toss it open and let people jump in as they will. Hank, I saw your thumb up. I don't know if that was a no. Okay. Let me start with a question. Maybe this is jumping ahead. What role can public policy play in helping individuals from harsh environments transition to slower life strategies? You're muted, Marcia. I saw you saying something. I do think that one of the things that's interesting about this topic within evolutionary psychology is that it does have some public policy implications to it, I think.
I just want to introduce one question, which is how did contraception and how does contraception introduce another variable into your either or strategy?
Do you have some thoughts on that? That's a great question.
Well, it's predominantly, I'm speaking for my husband, who thinks it was the most profound thing that happened in our modern society, in that it allowed people to make choices that women allowed women to make choices that they really had a difficult time controlling in the past. So he really looks at all of gender interactions as pivoting around before and after contraception, because before, women didn't have the capacity to control situations that determined their outcomes.
Yeah, certainly any form of contraception allows a delayed reproductive strategy to be more easily implemented. That would be one thing for sure. I'm not sure I got the sequence here, but I think we have Hank, Kathleen, and Robin. Forgive me if I got you out of order. Go ahead, Hank.
Okay. Well, great presentation. Thank you for summarizing all the stuff I've been trying to plow through in a couple of days. So that's useful. But I'm trying to think about it from a kind of didn't know about this aspect in evolutionary biology. So I'm just thinking about human life and animal life and just scarce resources and stable resources and how that shapes groups, how it shapes nations, and how it shapes families and individuals. So if you think about just in terms of poverty in this first world country who has third world issues too, people in the ghetto who are exposed to very fast, not life history, but fast living. And so, you'll hear stories of, well, why I'm in a ghetto, I don't have long to live, I might as well take all the risks possible and have fun. I don't know, whatever the rationalization is. The other is, let's say, let's say individual, let's say as a therapist, you have people who can be very depressed for whatever reason. They don't believe there are many resources available within them or outside of them. So I guess fast tracking it is like, let me just rush out of life. So these are just my early
Yeah,
thoughts.
yeah, you're I would only take issue with one word you used, and that would be rationalization. If you're in a harsh environment, to adapt a fast life strategy would be sensible and adaptive. The other circumstance you mentioned is if somebody has a lot of self-doubts, if they're in a benign environment, but they still don't feel that they're going to be very successful, that might lead them to adopt a live fast, die young strategy that would become then an almost self-fulfilling prophecy that they would not needed to have adopted because of the environment, but because of their beliefs. Um, Sort of that's an interesting distinction, I think.
Yes, Steve. So I don't like it, but I appreciate your term, die young.
Yes, I think
It's a fast strategy. Yeah.
we titled this "Live Fast, Die Young," which would be
Oh, you
a
did? Oh, okay.
colloquial way of talking about a fast life strategy.
Yeah.
Yeah, Kathleen.
Contraception did change a lot. And your question, thank you for the presentation, by the way, and really good question to start with. The first thing that comes to my mind is education, because of or vocational training, having hope for the future. But obviously that all goes together with having enough food to eat every day. You can't educate yourself very well if you're having trouble, if you're feeling hungry all the time, and if you're afraid to walk out of your apartment for getting shot, which is what Ta-Nehisi Coates describes in his book Between the World and Me. Just the getting to school and back was terrifying for him. But with women having slow life strategies, part of the environment includes what other women are doing. That's part of the environment. And so contraception really complicates that as well, but in any case, if a woman knows that other women are going to be easy, then it's harder for her to make someone wait, if you know what I'm saying. So I just wanted to point out that the environment includes what other women are doing. And I'm too interested in what other people want to say now, so I'm just going to leave it there.
And it just hit me, Kathleen, when you stopped there for a split second to say to use the term easy. The other term that is sometimes applied is fast.
Yeah.
Which kind of fits what we're talking about.
Exactly.
Yeah. Rob and then Marcia.
Oh boy, I have such a melange of things. I'm going to throw a lot of stuff at the wall as fast as I can. One is that I'm curious about the relationship between intelligence and I mean that in a very broad sense, and adopting these reproductive strategies, because I think about the octopus, which mates once in its lifetime near the end of her life and produces 1,000 babies with the assumption that 999 of them are going to be eaten, and the relative success of reproduction is limited. And I just watched a documentary about orangutans, which are quite intelligent and quite close to us in many ways. I must say this is the first time I've seen their ears, and they're absolutely human ears. But they, like us, have a lot of neoteny. The baby is born and clings to the mother for, I think, 8 or 10 years before it's even ready to start moving out on its own. So there's a very long period of maternal investment in the child. And I think that's related also to a kind of intelligence. They seem to be quite intelligent. So so that's one issue I was thinking about. There are animals that produce zillions of babies and just they're on their own.
Yeah,
And there are animals
primates as a class tend to have more slow strategies
more
compared
slow strategy,
to
right?
other species. Yeah.
Yeah, so we're inclined in that way. The other idea I had, I kept because of the fast and slow references that we're making here. I'm thinking about fast and slow thinking, the Kahneman and Dvorsky ideas, and the fast thinking is intuitive, and a quick sort of rough guess at what's the right strategy, and slow thinking is more deliberative, and so obviously requires more time and more investment of intellectual resources. And the fact that humans are doing both at the same time suggests that what we really have is a kind of mix and a very complex mix of both strategies in terms of reproductive and life success.
Mm-hmm.
So when we adopted agriculture, which is my peeve, um, we discovered that growing more food meant you had to do more farming, and to do more farming you had to have more children, and when you had more children you had higher child mortality, so then you were driven to have even more children, and it just drives and drives and drives, and it's produced the mess we're in today. So um, I think maybe we have to be more deliberative in the policy sense in how we design our social structures for the future going forward. And I'll think of more crap to throw
Okay.
out soon, but that's enough.
One thing I should have probably clarified when I was describing the trade-offs and the choices. That's not to imply that any of these are conscious.
Right.
You may adopt a slow or fast life strategy without any to piggyback on,
Awareness.
yeah, without any awareness, without any slow. You can adopt a slow strategy without any slow thinking to piggyback on Kahneman. But I think Marcia and then Chris and Diane.
Very quickly, the plight of single Black men, young single Black men, is very fast oriented, and they don't die, but they end up in prison. So I think we ought to put that little pathway into our thinking about modern times and poverty. They do die at a higher rate also, but the main way that they die, in my viewpoint, is that they do something really stupid and end up in prison. So that I just wanted to put that point in. And then the other relates to slow fast is we know that the prefrontal frontal lobes, I always said it was the last lobe in and the first lobe out in human development. Okay. And it's really not complete. We used to think it was relatively complete by 21. And those of us who've had children are moving it more toward 30. When is it? But in any case, there's a tremendous, it comes along with thinking about why would the so-called attention deficit disorder keep showing up if it's really a quote unquote disorder. Okay. And it may be because it sucks people into fast reproduction. And so they're getting the genes moving along, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're successful in other endeavors. So I think the biological development of the frontal lobes plays a role in this too. Thank you.
Yeah, that's interesting observation. Another key point I maybe should have stressed is that each of us, as an individual Homo sapiens, have the potential to either live a fast or slow life strategy. You're not born. It's what environment you're in determines which life history strategy you choose, not your genes. You're capable of doing both. Chris and then Diane. You're muted, Chris.
Sorry. Yeah, I just wanted to raise the fact that the people choose to not reproduce at all, and that this is and sometimes this may have something to do with family or group survival. but also there are more and more young people looking even beyond the human species and looking at the planet and the damage done by human reproduction. And I mean, I know one person a woman who chose to be sterilized at a pretty young age because she didn't want to do any more damage to the planet. And so I think, and there are other people saying this is not the world I want to bring kids into because of climate change. And so I think it's an interesting question to say, when we choose to reproduce or not reproduce, whose good are we thinking about? Are we thinking about our family that already has enough kids? Are we thinking about our sort of tribe or our species that already has too many people? Are we thinking beyond our species? And how does what we identify with and care about affect our strategy?
That's really interesting. Nothing that I'm not an expert in this area, but none of the articles I read discussed the issue of decision to be childless. That was not an option. I suppose that's the ultimate slow life strategy, is to decide not to have children at all.
Well,
Diane,
I mean,
go ahead.
related, I would just say that you know, the choice to not live can also fit into those kinds of concerns.
Yeah, I guess the connective tissue there with the slow life strategy would be not having much faith in the future. Although not having much faith in the future is what pushes you towards a fast life strategy usually. But I suppose there's a way in which it could push you to that ultimate slow life strategy too. Interesting. Diane?
Yeah, I wanted to go back a little bit to evolution and talk about this idea. First was brought up as a way of characterizing species rather than characterizing individuals.
Yep.
So when you have within species variation, yes, it's going to depend on the circumstances. But I mean, if you're an ant, you only have so many days or weeks or something to live. And if you're a big shark, you might live 400 years. And if you're a human, you might live 85 years, you know. These kinds of things are built into the organism. And so it's very interesting to apply this idea of living fast or living slow at the level of individual differences, but also sex differences and also culture differences. So what does this tell us about the evolution of human beings is something we need to look at. Clearly, we must be prepared with the potential to deal with many different kinds of environments, which is one definition maybe of intelligence, to be able to adapt to different environments. So probably using it as a way of talking about individual differences does make sense, but it also neglects the fact that there are people who, as Steve was pointing out, go against their type. Rich playboys who live fast, you know, poor downtrodden women who invest everything into their children, and so on and so forth.
Really interesting, Diane. The idea that the reason that you don't have a lot of individual variation in a lot of species is they don't have environmental variation. You know, most ants live in the same environment, therefore they have the same lifespan and they all adopt the same strategy. But we humans have we create different environments for ourselves, and therefore we end up choosing different strategies. It's a very interesting observation. And I think, Diane, the question you're raising, and I'd like to come back to it. We have a bunch of hands up, but I would like to come back to it too, is that question of what is it about an individual that goes against the grain, if you will. that despite their environment adopts a different strategy than what the environment says would be adaptive? That's a really interesting question, I think. David and Alan haven't spoke. David, Alan, and Andy, because you guys haven't spoken yet, and then I'll go to Hank and Rob.
Is my sound on?
Yep.
Yes.
Thank you. I just have a question. What do you guys think about people who are in different environments than the strategy they choose? Can that be valuable to be contra your environment? And I'm thinking particularly of Elon Musk. I have a wonderful picture of him sitting on his laptop, probably firing thousands of people with his kid on his lap. And he was raised in a very fast environment, and he's made billions of dollars in a very slow environment. And I wonder just what do you guys think about that?
Any
He does have a dozen children.
say that again, Diane? I missed it.
I said he has a dozen children.
Yes, yes.
Didn't Genghis Khan have like 1,000?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The implication, Diane, is that he's adopted a fast life strategy. Okay.
I think one point here is that comparing us to the ants, for instance, is humans do appear to have the capacity to have a choice. We do have agency, and many species don't have that same set of intention and agencies leading up to the choices that we make. So I think he made a choice.
Alan?
Am I on?
Yeah, you're on, Alan.
So I kind of have trouble viewing any humans as having a genuinely fast life strategy. But the thing that came to my mind was two kind of paired phenomena. One is a case at Denton's Deaths of Despair, where they discovered a demographic dip in white working class males to the tune of 500,000 people. And on investigation, it was primarily suicide, poor healthcare, drug overdose. And the classic white punks on dope, which is the total opposite end of the spectrum, where, upper class kids are aimless and ultimately self-destructive and commonly perish. And it seems to me and other people have touched on this, that the intersection is meaning. If you see a meaningful path forward, you operate in one way, and if you don't, time to party, because why not? So,
yeah, I think you hit on one of the key perceptual differences is whether or not you see yourself living a long life or not. Is clearly going to influence which of these strategies you think would be adaptive. Now, again, not necessarily at a conscious, deliberative, intentional level, but
or even a short life that might contribute to a longer term project. I think.
I think we have Andy, and then Rob, and then Hank.
Thanks, Steve, and apologies for my late arrival. I'm sorry to have missed your presentation. The question of whether a fast or a slow life strategy is adaptive is, I think, related in some ways to a question my grad school roommate studied, which is that what's the appropriate time horizon that should be taken into account when you're making moral decisions? Should you be thinking about what the consequences in the next 10 minutes or over the next 10 generations? And he ended up concluding, of course, that the longer your time horizon, the length of your time horizon will affect what you consider moral. So somebody who, a short person with a very short time horizon and a person with a very long time horizon might be alike in every other respect, and yet still arrive at very different moral conclusions, just based on the window that they decide to think about as relevant. And just in this connection, just thought I'd mention this in passing because it seems relevant too. I believe there's recently been a declaration on the rights. There's an international conference aimed to declare and articulate the rights of future generations.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No argument, Andy. That sounds right on the money. Rob?
Okay. Too many things again. I worked on a business book in the 90s, and we asked business executives what they considered a long time. And it turned out that the average was 3 months.
Hmm.
And that was the quarterly report.
It's a quarterly report. I was going to
And
say, yeah.
and we made the assertion that you know, that cultures that think of a long term as 7 generations are more likely to be in tune with, I guess that's a slow way of approaching things. So I wanted to get back a little bit to what Chris and I think maybe Marcia were saying about not having children. There was a website in the 90s called the Voluntary Human Extinction Movement. I think it's VHEMVNT or something like that. Was a slightly facetious website created by a science teacher. But he was saying that if we all decided not to have children, we would save the planet, and it would be a wonderful experience for the last people around to watch the sunset without all the disturbances that so-called civilization implies to it. But that led me to think about, long-term thinking and what level of sentience, that is awareness, is required to think beyond one's individual self-interest or one small group self-interest or the larger group self-interest until you get to a planetary interest. And people kind of move towards a much broader view. And I'd like to know how we're going to work toward that.
Yeah, interesting. Certainly children don't begin with
No.
that ability. That comes with development. Hank.
Wow, Rob, so much to think about. But I'm thinking a little whimsically because I haven't thought this out. But I was thinking about not just Kahneman's thinking about fast and slow thinking or fast and slow history, but if we look at the bigger picture of cooperation and the competition. So I haven't really thought it out, and none of the readings have addressed it. But I wonder if I'm just intuitively guessing, which is fast thinking, that's no, I can't really guess. I have no side to take about how to think about cooperation or competition in this on a group or tribal level. Now, I'm not talking about individual level, but on the more global level.
Well, let me ask since you mentioned, groups and tribalism. Let me toss out another question. Can we talk about fast versus slow cultures in the way that we talk about, for example, tight versus loose cultures? Are there some cultures where the cultural norms, obviously there's going to be some individual variability within each culture, but are there some cultures, would it be fair to characterize different cultures as fast or slow? What do people think? Andy.
Yeah, I think certainly the fact that the business world is trying to keep profits up for the next quarter suggests that that's a community, a sub-community, if you will, with a relatively short time
Subculture.
horizon. Yeah, and as a philosopher, of course, my dream is to throw a few ideas out there that are still pinging around 1,000 years from now. So we philosophers differ from your average, I don't know. We're a little different. We're built a little different.
Yes, you have hope for your own immortality in a way I do not, Andy. That's for sure.
Remember what Woody Allen said about immortality? He said, I don't want the kind of immortality that preserves my ideas forever. I want the kind of immortality that involves not dying.
Perfect.
About this issue, I was listening to John Kabat-Zinn talking in a meditation and talking about being in the present. And he says, he comes up with his little metaphors and he talks about when you look at your watch, all you're going to see is the clock of now.
Mhm.
So when you think of, this is at another level, of course, but I just came across and I found that
Well,
quite interesting. And here it's coming up.
if people think that there are fast and slow cultures, which ones would you put under each category? Is America a fast or slow culture? Is China a fast or slow culture? Would people venture to assign any labels? Yeah, Ken.
Well,
just,
I
I
think you
mean,
need to define them. Pardon.
Yeah, go ahead, Diane, and then Ken. Diane froze, so we'll go to Ken.
okay, I was just going to just briefly say that, you know, it depends. I mean, we have an
Is
enormously
longevity.
varied culture in the U.S. What is Diane still?
I think she's thawing.
Okay, and so there's immense variation
Voice.
within our culture. So you can't talk about any one particular. We have of a wide variety of strategies in the U.S. That's all I wanted to say.
No, we're fast.
Go ahead, Marcia. Go ahead.
I think competition, I think capitalism, I think all of them. The Puritans started it. If you're not working, you're going to hell. Okay. And we've been working like dogs ever since that. So I would say we're definitely the epitome of the fast. And I'm sure that in fact, I think a lot of people come here because they associate certain outcomes with our culture and then discover that there's some negative things that go along with that. But I would put us in the fast. Not that there aren't people who are practicing meditation and looking beyond that lifestyle. I would agree with you, Ken. It's not a homogeneous, but the theme is fast. I'll put that out.
I was referring specifically, exclusively to birth rate.
Oh,
Yeah.
Choice of birth and birth
Yeah.
rate.
If you look at the terms a little more broadly than just birth rate, excuse me, I guess one yardstick you could use is to what degree does a culture concern itself with future generations? That might be one measure of whether you might think a culture of being fast and slow, just off the top of my head. Chris.
Yeah, I'm thinking that I'm thinking about Japan.
Yeah.
And it's kind of maybe it's a mixed bag. I don't know, but I mean they certainly have a very low birth rate, and they certainly think a lot about saving the past for the future.
Mm-hmm.
I would say they do both of those things are true. The low birth rate in part has something to do with cost of living and availability of childcare and economics, but I think it's kind of a there's a contrast if you think about it. I mean, there as a culture they are very focused on saving the past for the future, and they have very few children because they do invest a lot, and part of it is they do invest a lot in each child.
Right.
But on the whole, it's kind of a threat to their culture because they don't take immigrants really, and so there's a lot of there's a decline that's coming. So I think it's kind of interesting to think about it with this lens.
The idea of parental investment, I think, is key if you think about fast versus slow cultures. A moment ago, I said maybe one way to think about a slow culture is a culture that is concerned with future generations. That's sort of a cultural way of saying high parental investment, in a way. If you want to broaden parental investment to, not just your immediate progeny, but, future generations down the road. Rob.
The birth rates are falling in industrial societies generally. It began with Japan. People are marrying later or not at all. They're having fewer or no children. It's a highly industrialized society. We're an industrialized society. Our birth rate is dropping. In in my opinion, and I'm not the only one, the Earth has too many people on it already. I was at a meeting in the early 2000s with a lot of experts, and one of them was a guy from the CDC, and he came up to me and said, "We have 5 billion too many people on this planet." And that just confirmed what I'd sort of intuitively been thinking. The fact that the population, the birth rate is dropping suggests to me that it's not a conscious decision. There's a biological drive that is suggesting that maybe the crowding is getting too intense and we should be slowing down. We have this impulse to replace it with immigration, and Chris is right. There's very little immigration into Japan, so they're kind of stuck. But I'm wondering if there aren't evolutionary drives towards controlling population. There are all these predator and prey studies that show how they balance each other out. But it also suggests that we're thinking more long term and more. We're getting there. I hope.
It was interesting. I guess you could say that over the arc of human history, long-term thinking has increased, perhaps.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping.
Yeah, at the risk of some generalization.
Yeah.
Hank and then Andy.
Yeah, I was thinking about what am I talking about? Oh yeah, tradition and progress. And is tradition slow slow-paced history, and is progress fast-paced history? So I was thinking of the Fiddler on the Roof story about he's singing tradition, but he's also realizing we got to get fast-paced. I got to let my daughters do what they want to do, and he's even asking his wife about fast-paced life. Do you love me? So again, if we think about on this level of tradition and progress and the kind of trade-offs that happen on a larger scale.
Well, tradition could be fast or slow depending on what the tradition is. If the tradition is to have 6 kids by the time you're 17, then that's so there could be cultural traditions that are fast and cultural traditions that are slow.
Yeah. Thanks, Steve. Let me be clearer. I was thinking in terms of also of institutions, whether it's religious institutions, or let's say if you've studied bureaucracy. Now that should be slow-paced thinking, and if you read Chekhov and all of those. So I'm thinking also in terms of tribes, not just the culture, but organizations. How do they get stuck? How do you move them? And so if you think of fast pace, you're thinking about progress and changing the slow pace. Okay.
That's for some reason when you said institutions, I thought, now what is the Catholic Church? Is that inculcating fast or slow? And on the one hand, it's slow because they want you to wait to have children until after you're married. On the other hand, at least historically, they encourage large families, which means less parental investment in each progeny, which is sort of a fast strategy. So seems like an amalgam of both to me.
Well, they're not that quick at encouraging keeping up to date with science.
Yeah, that's yes.
Not just that situation.
Andy and then Ken.
Yeah, I wonder if you all think there's anything to this. There are days when it feels to me as though systemic forces are accelerating cultural evolution to a breakneck speed. Think about, how much the internet has sped up communications. Think about the fact that Silicon Valley and the masters of the universe in Silicon Valley went by the mantra, move fast and break things for a few decades. I forget, was it Joseph Schumpeter, the economist, who said that, in any free market economy, you're going to get cycles of creative destruction. I wonder if free market economics doesn't accelerate cultural progress. Internet certainly does. And as a progressive, and a humanist. I like to think that human progress is, on the whole, a good thing. But the current pace of society is kind of scaring me a little bit. I think I might be becoming more Republican every day.
I would only say, Andy, I think that's a very
Go
interesting.
backwards.
It's an interesting topic, but I think the pace of cultural change, whether the pace of cultural change is fast or slow, is a different area than whether we're talking about faster life, personal life history strategies.
Fair.
Maybe there's a relationship between the two that's eluding me, but
I think there's definitely a relationship.
go ahead, Marcia, say what
I
connection.
just think there's definitely a relationship. Environments influence the people living in the environment. That's what it's all about. And they actually drive, and culture is the environment in which we live. And there are parts of it now that are, I still maintain that we're fast.
So if the pace of cultural change is fast, it might lead to more individuals within that culture adapting a fast life history strategy in the more narrow sense that I described it in my introduction, is what you're.
Or not being able to keep up, which is another factor.
Mm-hmm.
Noah Harari, when he talks about the fast pace of the digital world, and I forget the rule, but the faster the digital world is moving, we can't keep up. And
yes, and that makes sense. I could see the connection just popped into my head as we're talking about this, that to the extent that a fast life history is adopted when an individual doesn't have a sense that they can predict the future, right? The future is uncertain and I can't predict it. Now, if you're in a harsh inner city environment, that means one thing. But applying it to fast cultural change, it means a little bit something different. I just don't know what the future is going to bring. And so maybe I'm hardwired, if that's how you feel, that pushes you a little bit towards a fast life history strategy. So that makes sense, Marcia. Yeah. Ken.
Okay, well, let's start with saying, how long will it be before we're talking about the cultural evolution and the new species that has just entered the planet, and it's called artificial intelligence. But just in response to what Steve said, the Catholic Church, was organized religion was the glue that held social groups together, tribal groups together. So its desire not to have people have children before they were married was so that they could control birth, and then you have the encouragement after it. So that explains that.
Okay.
And that's all.
I'm just noticing the time, and I should have said this at the beginning. We did at our last Examine Lives session decide that we would go to 12:30 for those folks who wanted to stay. So there's no penalty, no fault if you have a fast stop at noon or simply just wish to sign off at noon. And we're right about there. I think what we should do, though, before everybody, or at least a few people, decide to sign off, is I wanted to suggest a topic for next month. We have our topics picked for November and December already. Andy Norman is going to talk about the legacy of Dan Dennett in December. And I forget what the November topic is now. I forget. Diane, do you remember? You're muted, Diane.
You're muted, Diane.
Yep.
I know she was going to do something on siblings, if I recall.
Yes. What is our November topic, Diane?
Connection. We talked about doing something on siblings,
right,
but
okay.
Was it in October or November?
No, that's November. So the topic I wanted to suggest for next month is gossip. The evolutionary significance and function of gossip.
Garrison Keillor defines gossip as trading hard information about people.
Yes. So if that's okay with everybody, does anybody object to that topic for next month? Okay. So we're just about at noon. How many folks want to stay on and chat a little longer? I can stay as long as people want. 1, 2. Okay. If you need to
I-
sign off, just go ahead and click your button. Otherwise,
Yeah, probably.
otherwise, those of us who want to chat a little longer will do so.
I have a dinner reservation in Paris, so
Thanks,
Oh.
folks, but
Oh,
don't,
I have
poor
to go.
Rob.
Yes.
The pauvre.
Yes.
thanks, folks, but don't talk behind my back.
Désolé, mais
Okay. Well, yeah, we won't talk behind your back. Speaking of
Not
gossip.
yet, anyway. We'll wait till
You
next
can-
time.
no
Next
gossip.
time, you do it in front of me. Okay, bye.
Okay.
Ken, go ahead.
Oh, no, that's
Oh.
ancient history.
Yeah, I gotta go. Yeah, I got a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
I can't stay much longer, but I want to stay as long as I can.
Okay. All right. Good enough.
Same here.
Can I
Oth-
throw out a question
You sure can.
about culture? A lot of people like to talk about individualistic versus collectivistic cultures. Do
Mhm.
you think they would differ in being fast or slow?
Hmm.
I think like Japan is more of a collectivist culture than we are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Slower.
I think that also the balance between cooperation and competition in a culture will then drift down and alter how people live their lives.
Actually, that's related to individualism, collectivism.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, precisely so, because the individual in a collectivist society is generally not motivated. His initiative is not motivated, whereas in a competitive one, it's highly motivated, as Masha has pointed out.
I'm looking at some of the other discussion questions I had posted. Let me just see if there's one that might be interesting to toss out. Oh, this one I thought was interesting.
Bye-bye, Rob.
Enjoy
Bon
your
appetit.
Yes. Bon appetit. Very good.
Jealous for words.
Is it possible for individuals to switch between fast and slow life strategies over the course of their lives?
Absolutely.
And what factors might drive such a shift? I think that's an interesting question. Go ahead, Marcia.
I would just say, I retired 11 years ago, and I said I was going to rewire, not retire. And I've now, 11 years later, would say that exactly what that meant was moving away from fast to slow. And because the purposes of different parts of your life are different. And for now, the meaning in my life is about peace and relaxation and increased awareness and joy. And I didn't have time to think about those kind of meaning questions because I was very much involved in being successful and running my own practice and taking care of a lot of people and blah, blah, blah. But no, so I think it does evolve. And I think that's what aging, actually, the greatest attribute of aging is you get a chance to experience slowness.
Again, I'm right with you, but on that, but I'm not sure that the slowness you're discussing is the same thing as what is more narrowly meant by a slow life history strategy.
Okay, say it
you're
one more
talking-
time then, Steve, so I can see
Well,
where I'm wrong.
You're talking about a change in personal values, a change in the pace of your life, a change in how much work-life balance you have, if you will. But I think the evolutionary theory about slow versus fast life history strategies has more to do with the trade-offs that I listed on that very first slide, which
Okay,
is
let
it's a little
me
bit.
add one more thing to this period of my life. I have gone back and have become quite conscious in my relationship with my son. Only had one son, and his
Okay.
and his daughter only had
Mhm.
one daughter. So we're doing pretty well that way. But I'm reworking all sorts of things in order in my own heart to improve his longevity,
Well, then I would think
his
that
survival.
that definitely would fit because to translate that into the language of this theory, you've changed the salience of parental investment.
Mhm. I'm
Um,
changing the balance.
yeah. As you said that, one of the things that I've seen is that I know a number of people, and this is going to maybe there's a sex difference here, because what I'm about to say applies to several men that I know rather than women, but that were not highly parentally invested as a father, but are fairly invested as grandfathers in their grandchildren,
I think
which is
that's
a
an
change.
that's a good observation.
Yeah, and I don't know. I haven't seen that in women friends, but I do have some men friends who they were busy with their careers and a little bit more peripherally involved with their children, but in retirement with free time on their hands, they're much more invested in grandchildren. Anyhow,
Well,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think that
Chris.
has to do with women's
Mhm.
options and choices, particularly in our generation, where it was pretty common for men to be the primary breadwinner and women to be spending more time with kids and to have fewer options either for careers or for getting ahead in those careers. And so as couples, they would prioritize the husband's earning potential by him not being involved. And
Mhm.
I think that has changed with the with younger generations where people are more equally educated. And right now, 60% of college students are women,
Mhm.
and our birth rate is falling. And I have a feeling that the current generation is not going to see that kind of difference when they move from parenthood to grandparenthood.
Diane.
I think that's an interesting observation, but I don't think that a man's being very invested in his career in the traditional way is a sign of fast life history.
No.
It's slow
Say that
because
again.
and it has to do with supporting the younger generation.
Mhm.
It may not be involved in direct care, but all of that work and accumulation is very frequently directed, at least in the man's mind, towards his children.
So let me bring the question back to a change in socioeconomic status. Let's say rather than an age change, let's come at the question a little bit in terms of what if somebody moves from a harsh environment to a more benign environment? Will that induce a change in which strategy somebody adopts?
Well, that would kind of
It should.
that would apply to, I think refugees would be a good group to
Oh.
look at in that regard, because they've been in
Mhm.
refugee camps, for example, and then they move to this
Mhm.
country. So they're, I mean, I don't know if people have studied that, but of course their reproductive course is often different because they may not have access to birth control in those camps, and then they have more access to it. So I mean, there's a lot of factors.
Is a lower birth rate associated with higher socioeconomic status?
Yes.
Well, that fits the theory like a glove then.
Yeah.
Is that as your socioeconomic status increases, you're more prone to adopt a slow life history strategy, at least in terms of choosing to delay reproduction, have fewer children. That fits
One
pretty
of my
well.
colleagues is an economics professor who sometimes says the rich get richer and the poor have children.
Yeah,
Well,
Diane.
geographically, this is true. The only place with growing population anymore, roughly speaking, is Africa, which is still
Mhm.
quite poor.
Mhm.
South
And
America.
as they are becoming more prosperous, of course, a key factor in this is education of women. As the societies become more prosperous, more women more girls are educated, the more educated girls are, the less likely they are to have multiple children.
Mhm. Yeah, so there may be some confounding variables, but it is right in line with what this theory would predict. So, other comments or thoughts or questions?
Well, I
Yeah.
was just going to say that South America also has a very high population rate, and I believe it's Pakistan has a larger population than Russia. And that's something people don't know.
Well,
I
A
didn't.
tiny little country like that. Check it out.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
I remember seeing something that the idea that when a country gets more wealthy, they have fewer children is there's not this perfect relationship, and I can't remember what the issue is, but I know there are countries. Well, maybe India might be might be an example. For example, like
Except
Kathleen was
there,
going to say something.
India
are some
finally got things
exceptions.
under control, I understand. They now have the population is controlled.
Does anyone else feel like this coming election is sort of like a battle between two reproductive outlooks?
Say more.
yeah, that's interesting.
That because on the one hand, there's this group that, women should have children and that really wants to push women to have children young and is not interested in education. And it seems like short-term profit-driven, profit motive attitude, like rich people wanting more poor people to have children to provide workers at Amazon and so on and so forth.
You're implying that the Republican Party is more of a fast life strategy party than the Democratic
I
Party.
wasn't going to name names, but if the shoe fits,
Okay, that's we quite a leap from sort of the genetic and biological
well, but I mean,
underpinnings
a lot of them, I see them posting things like 16-year-old girls, their bodies, God made their bodies to have babies at that age. Their bodies will never be better equipped. Actually, that's not even wrong biologically, but
Mhm.
No, it isn't true.
Yeah, Marcia.
Look, one thing that we said earlier, which in my mind, I said, no, 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 no. And it was when we said a country invests in its youth. And the United States, I think, is really has I don't know how conscious the attitude is, but they have been sucking money out of the public education system regularly, consistently, and repeatedly. And how does that fit in with, I mean, where does that fit into the picture? I don't believe we are truly supporting our children in an optimal way. For instance, daycare, reducing stress in the mother when she's in between the first and fourth year of the child is the total source of mental health. Because attachment occurs, it's safe, the child goes out. We commit nothing to childcare. Okay. Education, as I say, at least in the state of North Carolina, it may be different in different states, but we have sucked as much money out of the public school system. And the main way they do it is actually shifting it to charter schools, which are private Christian schools. Okay.
Marcia, I couldn't agree more. I think you're right on the money with this. And if you will, and we're kind of getting a little far afield here from the topic, but that's fine. The additional half hour, so I guess we can.
my fault.
But if you if we know the theory talks about parental investment, but if we want to shift that to a culture's investment, I would agree that American culture, compared to many other Western industrialized democracies, as a culture, we don't invest highly in our children.
Just try to make
compared
people
to
have
other
a
cultures. Say
I'll
that,
throw the healthcare system in next, but you don't need to hear that.
yeah, same, but it's part of the same thing. We don't invest in vulnerable members of our society, which would include children and sick people. Yeah,
and it's becoming more and
Kathleen,
more.
go ahead, Kathleen. When you were
No,
gonna
what you said,
yeah. Again, I'm not sure that I have trouble tying some of this to the fast and slow life history theory, which is a little bit more narrow in focus.
Well, I do, because fast history is you're going to produce a lot of, and then maybe 99 of the octopus die out of 100. And slow is you're going to invest in them. So,
Right. Okay.
So it supports the United States as being fast.
yeah, yeah.
Hey, David, you haven't said a word all day. Do you have any thoughts on any of this? Not to put you on the spot, but
No, that's fine. Yeah, I joined in late, so I'm a little bit just catching up, but appreciating the yeah, the conversation. I guess yeah, well, yeah, I have you know, I have questions about understanding um the concept, but I imagine there's things that have been covered already, so I don't want to like hold us up with that.
yeah, I got you. Yeah, if you missed the introduction and didn't read any of the resources, this might have been a tough conversation to jump into the middle of and know what the heck we were talking about, but that's okay.
Yeah, I get the general idea. Yeah, but yeah.
It was great seeing all you. I gotta
All
go.
right.
Hold on, Marcia. There's a
Bye-bye. What?
Take care, Marcia.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Ken.
And I was just going to say, Dave, there's a 4-minute video in the resources that just tells you everything you need to know in 4 minutes.
I don't think I posted that in the resources, so I'm not sure what you're referring to. Did I? And
Yes,
I did.
it's. Let me.
Oh, I know. It's on the one. I know what page it's on. There's other text. There's text on that page as well, but
Yes.
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 Yeah. Yeah.
The life history and evolutionary trade-offs from Libra text.
Right. Yeah.
All right. I look forward to next time. I got to go teach. Luckily, my course is late on Thursday, but I got to get ready.
All right. We'll wrap it
Good
up here.
course.
We'll wrap it up
Thank
here.
you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so
Okay.
much. It was
Have a good
great.
one.
Thanks. It was a great intro, by the way, Steve.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Diane.
Steve.
All right. Bye, everyone.